And I went down to this freestyle contest in Inglewood, and I walked in, and I proceeded to watch Eminem in this freestyle battle. 8 Mile-esque, right? Like the movie, right?
Yeah.
And it was the Rap Sheet Rap Olympics. And he was competing in it. And I called my friend who I was in a rap group with, this kid Aristotle, to come down there. I was like, yo, you got to come down here and see this shit. And then I called my other best friend, who I had just hired to replace me in the mailroom when I got promoted to A&R Floater, this kid, Dean Geislinger, who was basically kind of like half living with his sister, half living at my house, and like called my mom and like was part of my family. And I say that because I'll get to the point of that in a second.
Okay.
But he was my best friend. And these were my two best friends. And I called them to come down there to the freestyle contest. And they showed up a couple hours later. And it was like the semifinals. And M was like, saying crazy things like, don't make my facial tissue a racial issue. Like all this like crazy shit that was like mind blowing. And so I went up to, he had lost. He lost in the finals. He went up against this rapper named Otherwise from like a local rap group called Project Blowed. And he's first round, he came out and he did this like, they played this KRS-One song that was like, Still Number One. You know the song Still Number One? I don't know, you may not know. But anyway, he did this like kind of shout out like verse. Like it was kind of like it wasn't really, like it was like a weird thing to pull in the finals of a freestyle battle. But anyway, he ended up losing in the finals, and he probably would have lost anyway because it was like hometown crowd, Inglewood, right? And for a few reasons. Rap Sheet was the first the only black-owned rap magazine at the time, right? And he was a white rapper, which was kind of like not a thing at that moment. White guys rapping, right? Coming off of like the Vanilla Ice Marky Mark years, right? And one of the other judges was a rapper named Juice, who was like kind of Eminem's rival in all these freestyle contests, these battle contests. And the winner of the contest then goes and battles the winner of last year, who was Juice. So Juice didn't want to see M because they had just gone to like triple overtime at Scribble Jam in Chicago like recently, right before that, right? So he didn't want to see M because he didn't want to be staged up by M. He knew M could beat him, right? And so for a myriad of reasons, and then M kind of throwing the first round of this finals, which was weird, he lost. And then M was pacing backstage, kind of like muttering on his breath, kind of like angry, teared up a little bit. And I went up to him and I was like, hey, I work at Interscope, I do A&R, Floater, but whatever.
You're an A&R.
A&R. And he introduced me to his manager at the time, a guy named Mark Kempf. It wasn't Paul. Paul was there too, but Paul was M's lawyer. Like,
oh wow,
he wasn't his manager, and I'd just become his lawyer as well. And so I went up to M and Mark Kempf. Mark Kempf gave me this sampler cassette, Slim Shady EP sampler cassette.
That's crazy.
And I drove home with Aristotle and Dean in the car, and I popped the cassette into my car, and we just like literally drove home with our fucking jaws on the ground. Like I had never heard anything like it in my whole life. And so I proceeded to immediately make copies of that for the people at Interscope, and was either over the next 5 months and basically largely ignored or ridiculed for it.
Wait, people didn't get it?
Every A&R passed.
Really?
Every A&R passed at Interscope. Every A&R passed at Interscope. And like I would get more, they sent me the Infinite album, I made new CDs, they sent me other unreleased stuff, I'd get phone calls from them. He was like unsigned hype in the Source. I wallpapered the A&R department. I put up his unsigned hype everywhere. I was like, you guys, this is crazy. Like this kid is gonna blow up. In the meantime, there was like rumors that Loud Records was interested in him, and then I got a phone call, basically that they were like, M's coming into town. Can you get him a meeting at Interscope? Said, I'll see what I can do. He said, you should come hang, whatever. We're going to be at the radio station, listen to us at the radio. We'll be on Power 106 on Friday night. And then we're going up to the Wake Up Show on Saturday night. So I went to Tom Wally's office and I tried to get them to take a meeting. And I was basically told no.
Wow.
And so in a last ditch effort, I took the cassette and I went over to Jimmy's office. Now the thing is, Jimmy and Tom weren't like super tight.
Okay.
There was kind of, and I didn't know at the time, I literally had no idea at the time. I was too young to understand this. But in retrospect, I was told that there was kind of like a little bit of like a battle. Like there was Tom and Jimmy had a little bit of a power struggle. And like you were either Tom's guy or you were Jimmy's guy. And so I was one of Tom's guys. So, but I went over to Jimmy's office. And when I walked in there, my best friend, Dean, was sitting at the assistant's desk. Because Jimmy's first assistant, a guy named Evan Strauss, was on his honeymoon. And so Jimmy's second assistant, a guy named Scott Igo, was sitting in as the first assistant. So for the second assistant, they pulled a kid out of the mailroom. And so my best friend, who had been pulled out of the mailroom, to temp on Jimmy's assistant desk. And I was like, yo, Dean, put this tape in Jimmy's bag. And he's like, no, I'm gonna get in trouble. And I was like, dude, come on, just do it. If anybody says anything, you can say it was me. Just put it in his bag. And Jimmy had a cassette tape. He had like a satchel that he would take home every weekend. And A&R guys would come in there and they'd drop cassette demo tapes in there they wanted Jimmy to listen to. And they'd put it in there and they'd take it home and he'd listen to it whenever he would listen to it. I don't know when he would listen to it, but when he would listen to it. And so I basically forced the tape into the bag. And I told Dean, if they say anything, you can blame it on me, right? I mean, it was kind of like a last-ditch effort at this point. Because I knew if this didn't happen, Eminem was going to sign with Loud Records. I knew it, okay? Friday night comes, M's up at Power 106, even on the radio at Power 106, because I recorded it. He's like, they're like, you know, Steve Rifkin, if you're listening, Eminem, Loud Records, like, you know, like there was no thought about Interscope whatsoever, right? Saturday morning, I get a page on my pager. This is what year it was. 911, Dean's number. Called Dean, I'm like, what's up? And he's like, Dre and Jimmy heard the tape. Is Eminem in town? I was like, yeah, he was at Power 106 last night. We're going up to the Wake Up Show tonight. Tell him to listen. They want to set up a meeting. I was like, cool, I'll make it happen. Let me connect you. So I connected them with M's people, set up a meeting for Monday. The M came in and they struck a deal. Now, on Monday, I went to go work on the Tupac project. Dean sat in on the meeting. And the last thing I said to Dean before I hung up the phone with him on Saturday was, you told him I brought it in, right? And he said, of course I did. Dean told him he brought it in. I didn't know that for 2 weeks, till 2 weeks later when people came up to me to start telling me, you know, Dean's telling people he brought Eminem in.